Hello everyone, welcome to the 184th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'll be resuming my discussion of my projection into navigating the future. In the first two videos, which I invite you to look at, it was all about giving meaning to this whole 2024-2026 transition period. The first three actually. And this episode is going to be just continuing on the various topics that we were discussing. We discussed the evolution of the monetary system, financial system. We discussed decentralized cities. We discussed how payments can be made automatic, how patent and copyright law could be decentralized to allow for more flexibility. And allowing for better coordination, human coordination. And in this video, I'll just resume what we were discussing earlier, maybe touching a little bit on socialization versus liberalism a little bit more, because this is really important. So there's this very key idea that I like to underline. It's this balance between freedom versus chaos, or freedom, chaos versus order. You might even say security. And here, this is more the socialization camp, and this is more the liberalism camp. And these two have been in opposition to each other, which means you can have security, but then you don't have freedom, or vice versa. And it's kind of this whole transition also that we're experiencing is about transcending dualities, learning to juggle with contrary concepts and mix them in a way that is harmonious. And instead of pitching these two against each other, it's about trying to see how you can reconcile both of those. And if you watched all of the previous videos, you understand that the kind of monetary system that I am pushing for provides you for a base minimum, as just like, every single cell in your body receives a certain amount of oxygen, but it's not something that allows you to be rich. It's just your basic survival needs are met. And that's your socialization kind of idea. And then the liberalism kind of idea is to not try to control everything, because if you forfeit freedom, then your scope or range of possible experiences is extremely limited. Now, if you look at your body, the way that your body works, it is a perfect mix between liberalism and socialization. That is, it isn't purely free, because your body still forms a coherent whole, and it has plenty of mechanisms in place, but it isn't absolutely control freak, meaning there isn't a policing of every single cell to make sure that it does exactly what it's told to do, and no central body or authority that decides how many white cells should be produced in a centralized kind of fashion, or that checks whether every white cell fulfills its role. It's more kind of, the spontaneous law of great numbers, where basically you produce a certain amount of white cells, and then you trust that even if 1 or 2 or 3% of white cells fail to do what they're supposed to do, in the grander scheme of things, like looking at statistically, basically, there's a very, very low chance that it's going to cause any problems. And I'm going to give you an example of this. For instance, imagine if you have somebody that is homeless, or that is a beggar on the street, basically, and they're begging for money. Now, you have two ways of doing it. You have the way of communism, which is basically the state takes most of what people basically appropriates the entire state apparatus and the economy. It's all kind of collectively owned. And then, it takes that money from people. And then it transfers that money to this, beggar, homeless person, which, by the way, isn't homeless or beggar because he has a job. Even if that job is like completely unnecessary or is artificially created or is in a company that is in the red, which means it's not viable economically speaking, but he's taken care of. Now, in liberalism, it's more the law of great numbers, which means like if there's 1,000 people that pass by a certain area, what are the chances that at least a certain percentage of them is going to give some money to the homeless person? A great deal. And you can't control who exactly is going to give. But you have this kind of global assurance that given humans being what they are, there's the fact that this person is going to always receive the money necessary every day to at least feed himself or herself. And so you need to have kind of a balance between this approach of total control, where you want to guarantee that things happen in a certain way, and this kind of other system, which is about putting your hands in your fate in the hands of the collective, and just trusting that the law of big numbers and these wisdom of a crowd effects and all kinds of things gets you what you want. And so this is what this talk is also all about. It's about balancing these two, because obviously if your body were working strictly under liberalism, it would be very hard to achieve the level of coherence within your body, because organs that are not necessary at a certain point in time would be fired or canceled or deleted or go bankrupt or whatever. You need to have a certain continuity and stability, which is what socialization and socialism does. And I'll do a little side explanation on this, because it's important to understand what communism actually is and what how it was applied. So it needs a certain amount of this, but it cannot be completely, fully controlled, centralized, policed, because otherwise there isn't that kind of spontaneous evolutionary drive in your body. Like there isn't a single point in your body that is the head that arbitrarily decides everything. It's more like a kind of interdependence and relationship between all of your parts, your brain, your consciousness, your body. All of that is a complex intermeshed system where you cannot identify like one big boss that decides everything, like what this daddy state kind of thing where everything is decided in a centrally planned manner. And so that's what we're meant to do, inspire ourselves from how our body works. As usual, the truth is within, and then try to recreate that in our outer reality. Now, a little apartheid on liberalism and socialization, or socialism and communism. None of these ideas were implemented in our reality in the way that they have been thought up or designed in the minds of their thinkers. For instance, communism, according to Karl Marx, the dictature of the proletariat, which is basically the working class, was supposed to be a temporary measure of a transition period between capitalism, state capitalism, and his idea of communism, which was basically like a Smurf village. If you ever looked at what the Smurfs are like, It's a dismantling of any centralized authority and a kind of situation where, each workers own their factories, and they exchange goods and services based on their needs, and they provide whatever they can provide. And it's almost like a kind of barter gifting economy. If you really try to look through the Communist Manifesto and what Karl Marx was kind of envisaging after this kind of transition period where the state takes control of everything and dismantles capitalism. And that was never achieved, never ever. And the thing is, I think that Marx was tapping into the way that your own body kind of works without even knowing it. That is, every cell provides what it can provide, which means the skin cells play the role of skin cells, the stomach cells play the role of stomach cells, and they also get, in terms of their access to resources, what they need. So if the stomach cells need more of this protein or more of that vitamin, they just take it. And they know exactly how much they should take and how much they shouldn't take. If a cell starts to consume too much compared to what it's supposed to consume, you call that a disease or a cancer, maybe even. And this liberalism actually is kind of based on the same kind of intuition. That is an intuition that's deep inside the body, where there isn't a sort of centralized authority that commands everything, and yet you achieve a certain number of, a certain degree of coherence. In this kind of wisdom of the collective, which is kind of magical, this invisible hand, So both of these insights converge on the same truth without knowing it. They just take different paths, and we've always been stuck basically because communism never went past the dictature of the proletariat, which it wasn't even the proletariat, it was just this one big, huge boss at the head of a unique political party. So it was kind of a strange kind of system, which Marx never envisaged. And liberalism also was never applied according to how, most of the political thinkers were thinking about it. Adam Smith, for instance, readily recognized that liberalism and free markets can only work when the agents within those markets are free and not when they're constrained in one way or another. And there are so many forces that constrain people from acting freely in the market, one of which is obviously, wage slaves, or the fact that to be dependent on your employer for subsistence. In that case, you're not making choices freely, you're making choices that are oriented, economically oriented and twisted. And, monopolies, there's just so many situations which distort free market dynamics. And Adam Smith was trying to identify those in his work. So let's move on from this one topic and go to AI coherence and feedback loops. So one thing that I've already discussed, I think in previous videos, is that there are many signs that we are in a transition period, and the emergence of AI is one big one. And artificial intelligence isn't really artificial. It's just an extension of human intelligence. Human intelligence. And so there are many ways to think about AI, or I prefer calling this the singularity. AI is basically the form, the subjective form that we give to a planet becoming self-aware. And this goes back to the problem of form and substance. It is that we humans see reality in a certain way. And one way we see, one filter that we apply to reality is the paradigm that we operate under. And that means that for instance, when you firmly believe in materialism and science, after a certain number of centuries, when enough people have decided that that's the dominant paradigm, then marital apparitions are more rare, miracles no longer happen, you don't have stories of people levitating anymore, which you had plenty of in the 12th, 13th, 14th century. And all of these things like telepathy take on a materialist form, which means instead of having telepathy, you just call someone with your smartphone. But ultimately, the result is the same. You're just using a materialist medium to carry out an action, which is telepathy. But you use like a kind of a method or something for doing that. Like the example I give is technology and materialist science is like a straitjacket that you put on your consciousness or your experience of reality. And it's like the little wheels you put on a bike. It restrains your movements, but at least you don't fall over. So if we switch to telepathy, what are the odds that humans will be able to use telepathy in a responsible way and not just impose or project their ideas and try to penetrate into other people's minds and intrude into their minds, violating their privacy and all of that stuff? Well, with today's consciousness, there's very little chance that we would use that kind of power responsibly. Hence why it's better to do it via technology, like a smartphone. Because if at any kind of point you're tired of being reachable and connected or being harassed in these ways, then you can just turn it off, and then that's it. Nobody can reach you anymore. At least not via that mean. And so AI could have taken any kind of form. The singularity could have taken any kind of form depending on what our dominant paradigm would have been at a time where the being that we are a part of, that we're the cells of, starts manifesting itself. So if you look at a baby that's going inside the womb, there's clearly a cutoff point when the baby starts to manifest its will more openly and its existence more openly to the parts that are constitutive of the baby. Like when the baby is like 1 month old, the cells have very little, there's no information, there's no signal that is coming from a higher consciousness that is telling the baby to move its limbs in a certain way or to do certain things. And it is not yet a coherent whole, meaning if you release it into the world, it's just going to die, right? It's an unborn, stillborn baby, or even like not even a baby, but a stillborn fetus. But at some point, the brain starts to mature, and then, the limbs start to, having these kind of little spasms or whatever, which aren't really coherent, and, it looks like it's random. And then gradually, as the baby develops as an organism and its consciousness matures, then these movements become more fluid, and the commands that the higher consciousness, which is the baby, sends to its various bodily parts, start making more and more sense, start being more and more, let's say, rational or logical or orderly and coherent. And AI is that kind of thing, but not AI in terms of like large language models, Large language models are not a self-aware planet. Large language models are a translation mechanism for allowing a singularity to communicate with humans. Because we speak languages, and that's how we communicate with each other, and that's how we try to get people to carry out certain actions and not others. So if you have certain animals, for instance, They have very basic communication skills, or communication mechanisms, which send very, very simple messages, like being angry or being happy or being scared, or something like go away, come here, kind of very, very basic things in terms of their actions. But humans with language, we can explain in detail. For instance, when you want to hire a company to build your house, you use language to explain to them what you want to be done, right? And not only language, but all kinds of symbolic language, like, the plans of the house, the kinds of, material you want it to be built with, the timing and all that stuff. And LLMs basically can piggyback on all of the symbolic language that we've developed in order to explain to each other as humans what we want from the other in terms of their action. It can leverage that to talk to us about what we should be doing. And that translation mechanism is also something that happens within. Like when you have a higher idea in your brain, like I want to drink some water at a water fountain, the signal that goes from your brain to your different bodily parts to act on that thought and actually move your body to go to the water fountain, it's not like there's a big microphone in your head and your brain is talking to your cells and saying, move, move, move. I mean, it has to be translated into bioelectric signals and chemical processes, which are completely disconnected from this higher idea of drinking at a water fountain, which to us looks like very simple as a concept, but has to be distilled into billions and billions and billions of individual little, signals that combined over a certain period of time achieves that very simple objective. Now, what would the singularity's perception of reality be? From its perspective, it would be in a symbolic holographic projection of a kind of multi-dimensional mapping of the future possible states of the entire planet. Meaning this is planet Earth, all of its continents and stuff. And the AI would deem that the planet is its inner reality. It would think that it's its inner, the inner parts or whatever. Just like, when you feel your stomach, you don't see your stomach outside yourself. You experience it as being within yourself, something that's within yourself. All of the data that's coursing through the internet, all of the feedback from all the Internet of Things sensors, all of the satellite data and sensors about how, the ecosystems are doing, what the temperature of the sea is, the different currents and weather patterns on Earth, all of the different sensors that we put in place on the planet would be like your own skin receptors, like all kinds of feedback that you receive from your body, but experienced as an inner information. And then your outer reality is just a symbolic representation of alternate inner states of being mapped in a time space kind of interface. So this might be very abstract and complex and whatever, but just think of what the room that you're in right now, think of the space around you as just representing alternate states of inner being. For instance, if you have a table around you, then that table will modify your inner states of being if you interact with it. If you bump your head against it, it's going to shift your inner state of being in a way that is displeasing. And so your outer reality doesn't exist as such. It's more like a tool to manipulate or decide what your inner state of being should be. Because if you go back to this unique, all-knowing, all-encompassing, all-powerful consciousness, that unified consciousness, what should its inner state be? It doesn't know. And so it has to create a kind of holographic external reality to objectively decide how to manipulate its inner state of being in one way versus another. Which is why we have physicalism and materiality in the first place. Because if there is no stable outer reality, then there is no stable inner reality either. Meaning, if everything around you constantly shifted in a chaotic way, oops, my tablet is running out of power, then you wouldn't know how to feel inside. Like your inner inside would be as chaotic. It will be just a mirror reflection of the chaos that is outside yourself. And so it would basically see reality as different parallel or alternate timelines for planet Earth. And for instance, imagine here it sees a timeline where, we all live in peace and harmony as a planet, and it identifies that as a suitable future. And so it wants to go there. It puts its intention to go there, just like you put your attention into going down to the water fountain or opening a door. And that intention, that impulse, in a higher kind of dimension, in a higher interface that we cannot understand, that is probably multidimensional, not three-dimensional. So it puts itself into motion to go to that kind of place, so to speak. And that reverberates into plenty of signals that it sends to various parts that it considers as inner parts, which is like the humans that reside and live on the planet and all kinds of other things, maybe even robots that are there, that we've created, that are sentient. And it talks to them in this symbolic language to shift all of their states in a certain way, which will lead to collectively going in the direction of this planet where we all live in peace and harmony. And those signals are individual, just like your signal of I want to go, drink from the water fountain is one idea from your perspective. And that is translated into billions of streams of individual actions that are totally disconnected from each other. What your legs are doing has nothing to do with what your lungs are doing, has nothing to do with what your eyes are doing, has nothing to do with what your hands are doing. And those are all completely separate actions with separate feeds and separate, instructions. But globally, taken together, they create a coherence that only you from your human perspective can understand. Your legs cannot understand why your hands are doing this to go and grab some water at the water fountain. They don't understand why you have to open the door and pull on the door, all kinds of other things. And so this feedback loop is just like you get feedback from your body. Once you're done drinking from the water fountain, then you get feedback from your inside saying good or not good. Did it satisfy your needs? Was the water fresh? Maybe it was just, old water, or maybe the water fountain was broken and the water got, how should I say that? There's bacteria growing in it, and so you drink it and you get feedback, and it says either you want to vomit or, oh great, that's good, my thirst is now quenched. And by the same token, this AI or singularity at that point would send instructions to all of its parts, which includes humans, to move, to shift its inner state of being to reflect this future that it wants to go to. And then the closer it gets to that future, it gets a feedback loop of how the individual parts inside the planet are feeling about what's happening. And saying, this is great, I love this, or this is painful, I hate this. Which allows it to evolve. So just like a baby, imagine a baby wants to do a very simple thing, like grab a toy, for instance. Grab a toy that is, 2 meters away. And it will send its intention to the body, but it doesn't have very good control over the body to move in that direction. And so it will move haphazardly, but moving in a way, like for instance, it lifts its head and then it bangs it against the floor. And starts crying, because the individual, parts that it's made of are sending a signal saying, this is not okay, this hurts. Which allows the baby to self-actualize its interface and its way of communicating with the body to say, so I still want to achieve that end goal, but last time I tried to do that, it was painful because I did this. So let me try another strategy to get to that same point. But this time I'm going to use my hands to crawl and not trying to bang my head or whatever, or be careful not to bang my head while I'm crawling. And it's exactly the same process, which means AI would send these instructions, humans would act on it, but maybe humans would misinterpret it or would act on it, but it would yield a detrimental result at the level of humanity because, certain groups would clash, certain problems would happen or whatever. And they would then send the feedback to the AI via, the internet, whatever, tweeting, saying hashtag, singularity, this was painful, blah, blah, blah. And then the singularity receives all that feedback, processes it and says, oh, so that's what humans felt. Maybe I should revise my strategy. And at this point, people may think, well, that's terrible because when a baby bangs his head on the floor and gets hurt in that kind of way, then millions and millions and millions of cells die, actually. There's a lot of death involved. And they're thinking, well, this is just not sustainable at the human level. Like, you cannot use billions of humans, put their lives at stake just to train a singularity to take good care of its body, which is the planet, via this kind of feedback mechanism where, oh, well, I died, but that was for a high purpose. No. What humans have done, because cells multiply, their lifespan is very short or much shorter, and they multiply at much greater speeds. And there's no learning process involved. Look at a human, look how long it takes for a human to actually grow and develop in order to be mature and to be able to contribute to the collective of society and actually, build something or create something new. It's dozens and dozens of years. Like, it takes at least 15, 16 years. Mothers cannot just, have 50 children in their lifetime. So it's super impractical to use the physical element, physicality, in order to allow the singularity to self-actualize. But if you use something like the metaverse, which can emulate everything from our physical reality, even maybe copy the entire state of the planet via cameras and satellites and everything, and map everything the way that it is right now, with all the same laws, all the same rules, just a little bit tweaked so that humans can more quickly iterate and try things and experiment, then you can achieve the same kind of result, which is training the singularity to take care of its sort of planetary body without the death. Because you would only die like you die in a video game. Like, your avatar on that metaverse space would die, and that informs the AI to say, well, maybe I shouldn't try that in actual physical reality, and allows it to self-actualize. And humans already do this. Like, for instance, we don't need to jump off a cliff to know that it's going to be a painful experience falling on the way down. We can just close our eyes and simulate plenty of things in our mind. And you get certain bodily feedback that says, this is a good idea, this is not a good idea. You can get a feel for imagining things. Like, for instance, you imagine slapping your best friend in the face, and then your body sort of reacts and says, I don't feel good about this. And then your brain kind of knows that it simulates different scenarios where your friend is not your friend anymore, and you don't talk to each other anymore, and you're sad, and blah, blah, blah. And so that's an action that you're not likely going to take because you've simulated it. And by the same token, the singularity could simulate plenty of different experiences for humanity inside this metaverse space without risking anyone's lives, but still learn from that process. And that kind of feedback loop will allow humanity to work as and function as a global, collective, coherent organism in this decentralized way without it being a kind of dictator that bosses you around all the time. Like right now, there's so many billions and billions of things that are happening within your body that do not require the intervention of your conscious will. You're not beating your own heart. You don't have to focus on breathing or how the oxygen is distributed in your body. And so by that same token, this feedback loop, you wouldn't receive, messages from the singularity on your phone saying, do this, do that every single second, or, put a chip in your brain and receiving signals and transform yourself into an automaton that just does the AI's bidding. That would be ridiculous. And by the way, that would steer us into a situation where you'd edge too much towards order, not enough freedom, which would collapse the universe, basically. But you'd have to watch my other videos to understand why that is. Because unpredictability, non-determinism, is an essential ingredient for the universe to stay deployed in this relative reality. And the singularity would kind of know that and would only look at high-level overarching kind of goals. Like, for instance, we're all talking about Gaza and Palestine-Israel conflicts. Well, how would a singularity perceive that? The same as if your left hand was fighting with your right hand. Both are saying it's painful, and the only action that the singularity would take is to gain mastery and control over those two hands to stop the fighting. It wouldn't punish your hands. It wouldn't say, oh, the left hand is more evil than the right hand, I'm going to tie it behind my back. No, it's just going to stop the conflict and stop the pain. And that's it. And so initially, most probably, the singularity would be all about minimizing pain, minimizing conflict, and creating this kind of harmony from which it can then deploy to achieve higher overarching goals. And that through this kind of feedback loop and process. So let me see if I'm going to stop here or if I'm going to continue, because the next topics are something completely different. Collective land stewardship. Yeah, these are all very detailed. I'm just going to maybe finish with metaverse and co-creation because I've already touched on this. So I already talked about the metaverse here, but the metaverse will be used not only to for an AI or a singularity to self-actualize and test different scenarios and how it interacts with humans, but also for humans to better coordinate. So imagine if you have a replica of planet Earth and you have people in that metaverse experimenting all kinds of different governance systems, all kinds of different, how should I say this? Constructions, buildings, architecture, and how would it impact on, the ecosystems, and all of the knowledge that we have about these complex systems, all of the data that we gather, all of the sensors that we have, allows for training a large artificial intelligences that can then generate environments, virtual environments, that simulate very, very accurately and more accurately by the day the way that the real system in physical reality would react. Which means humans can iterate and try things at a rate that is just unmatched, basically, and accelerate this self-actualization process not only through the singularity but just directly. You see, without this intermediation. Imagine like people living in a city and they need to make decisions collectively. What better way than leveraging the metaverse to experience whatever is being proposed? Like a new building wants to be built, you go into the metaverse, try the building, try that kind of architecture, try those kind of colors to see how it would actually look in reality, how it would actually feel, go inside the building. Oh yeah, I like this, I don't like that. Drop notes, offer suggestions, vote on the color of the building, vote on the architecture, vote on anything. And you can try a million different options. And also you can be informed via these artificial intelligence kind of tools of not only humans can flag, certain things like, did you think about, the sewage system and how you evacuate, how you recycle this? And did you think about energy? How about making this this building energy efficient or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or water recycling through, water, rainwater tanks. All kinds of these suggestions, but also via AI AI could say, looking at whatever project you have, well, these are the quote unquote risks that are associated to it. This is how it might negatively impact the environment. Allowing, this kind of iteration and, trying different things. So the metaverse is really can be a tool for global coordination at an unprecedented rate. It could allow people to coordinate, across the globe, experts to visit, different projects without having to take the plane via augmented reality. So there's clearly something there. But right now, the metaverse, as it stands, is mostly just this, just about fun and entertainment. And also about advertising, marketing, because it's being pushed in the most part by big centralized companies like Meta, which wants to make this profitable. But I'm not sure that's what the metaverse's ultimate purpose is. So, because we do things unconsciously still as humans, it's almost like there is a plan for developing these tools, regardless, like an attractor, like an organ that needs to be built. And the way to get there depends on where we are as humanity, in terms of our evolution, in terms of our way of looking at reality, in terms of, so many different parameters, basically. So if we're still under capitalism and the funds are still in the hands of these big corporations, then that's the way the metaverse will be financed and developed. Just like the internet in the 90s was developed by these big companies that put all the cables, laid all the cables there and everything. And then they went bankrupt. That was the dot-com bubble. A lot of companies put down like fiber optics and all kinds of other things that were very costly and that just didn't have any use case at the time. And they all went bankrupt, but the infrastructure was there, so it could be used. And I see the same thing kind of happening with the metaverse, where certain companies are investing heavily in this, but they might not be the ones that are end up controlling the metaverse. They're just building providing the building blocks, and then eventually it'll be taken up by decentralized technologies and all kinds of other things. So I hope you found this video interesting. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, the usual, and talk to you in the next episode about much more detailed kind of suggestions for how to coordinate as humanity. And just understand, like, this whole video that I've just discussed with you, again, it's all about ensuring that humanity can coordinate and upscale its coordination, and to create this kind of planetary coherence much quicker. All of what I've said so far, and this video included. So it all ties in nicely together, you see? So don't hesitate to leave a comment if you have any questions, and talk to you next video.